In this video, I'm going to show you how to build out the forms and surveys that you really want to build without having to pay for a subscription to something like Typeform or SurveyMonkey. And what we're going to do is build out a research pipeline to go from I have a question to having real people respond to that survey for us, and then having the AI help us go through the process of designing the survey, building it out in an HTML form, deploying it, and then sending it out to the people that we want to target with it. And to do that, we're going to use 4 tools: Codex, Cloudflare, Supabase, and Prolific. All right, so let's get started. You'll need accounts on the 4 different platforms, starting with OpenAI's ChatGPT. The $20 a month subscription is free. Then there's Supabase. This is totally free, and if you've never used it before, it's like Google Sheets, but on steroids. Then there's Cloudflare. And Cloudflare is what's going to allow us to actually host our survey on the internet so people can access it. And then lastly, there's Prolific. Prolific is what's going to allow us to find the people that we want to send the survey to and then send it to them. So let's get started with Codex. You'll have to go in, start a new project. You can start it from scratch. And I'm just going to call this Survey Demo Builder. And then what we want to do is actually connect Supabase and Cloudflare. So first we'll look under plugins for Supabase, and very simply you just hit Add to Codex. You'll have this authorization screen pop up, and you'll just hit Authorize. And once that's done, then we'll do the same thing for Cloudflare. Again, we'll look for Cloudflare, and I already have it installed, so I won't go through the whole authorization, but it's a very similar process. Then back in Prolific, we'll need to get an API token. So under API tokens, we'll create API token. You can name this whatever you want. I'll just call it Survey Demo. Now there's something very important here. You don't want to just take this and drop this into Codex. What we're going to do is create a .env file. And to do that, I'm going to open TextEdit on my Mac, and you should format this as plain text. So in the top menu, I'll click Format and hit Make Plain Text. And then I'm going to write down Prolific API token as my key and slap the API token right into this file as the value. Now as a side note, I accidentally used the colon between the key and value. It should be an equal sign. I'll save that in my Codex projects folder, and I'll name this .env. Now this is going to be a hidden file, so you're not actually going to see this in the folder. So now that we've got all the plumbing set up, we're ready to have Codex get to work. Now because this is a demo, I'm getting a little bit hacky with the prompt. So to quickly review, I'm starting with a role, in this case a researcher, giving it a bit of detail about what I want to learn and context about the tools we're going to use. Then a step-by-step process that I'm expecting Codex to go through, starting with designing the actual survey. Now here again, if this wasn't a demo, I would spend more time defining the role and what best practice means. After that, I'm telling it to go out and understand the Prolific API. And this is important because there are specific data points we need to collect and send back to Prolific to properly track responses. Then once it has that context, we want it to design the Supabase table that is going to store the responses. And you'll notice I don't just ask for the table, but also any necessary functions and RLS policies. And if you're not familiar with tables or databases, these are basically the rules our survey page will follow to put information into the table. Next, I'm asking it to turn that survey into an HTML form and making sure that it's connecting our Supabase table to it. Once it's created, I need Codex to go through and test that survey. This is especially important if you have any kind of branching or conditional logic. You'll notice that I'm specifically telling it to use the browser tool so that it opens the browser inside of Codex and tests the survey for me. I'm also specifically telling it not to proceed to step 6 until everything is working properly. When everything looks good, then it should publish the survey to the web using the Cloudflare MCP that we connected. And again, I'm telling it to use the browser tool to test the published version. Finally, I'm asking Codex to set up a new study on Prolific using the Prolific API and the API key that we saved in the .env file. I'm also asking it to set this up using the relevant audience for our survey, because within Prolific, you can specify the attributes of the people you want to send this to. Lastly, I'm telling it don't publish this thing because I want to review it in Prolific first. All right, let's run this. For the sake of the demo, I'm speeding up the recording, but you should definitely be keeping track of what it's doing and making sure you're monitoring it, especially because it will ask for permission to do certain things if you don't have it on full access, which you probably don't want to give it anyways. Now, this part I'm actually not speeding up. You can see it's going through and testing the survey for us that quickly, which if you've ever had to do survey testing, this is amazing. I hate testing surveys. But again, if this wasn't a demo, I would go through the survey and check each question, making sure that it actually aligns with my goal. So looks like Codex is all done. You can see the live page here, and this thing's ready for launch. Now, before we launch anything, we want to go into Prolific and make sure that Codex did what we expected it to. So within Prolific, I'm going to open up the project that it created. And when I open it, you can see the actual study details, starting with how we're going to collect responses. In this case, we're using an external study link, and you can see it already filled out the details. But we should be confirming it's correct. For example, we don't want to name this demo survey. People will be confused. And for data collection type, we want to switch that over to survey. So it's small things like this that we just need to make sure it didn't do anything funny with. Now here under data collection, this is very important as it's through the URL that we're collecting the specific info we need to confirm who completed the study. Then under completion paths, this is going to give you the option to choose whether you want to manually review each submission or you just want it to automatically pay out the respondents. For something more involved, I'd suggest manually reviewing. The redirect URL is where people are going to be sent after they complete the survey. And Codex already wired this up into our HTML form. And as we told Codex, we want 10 participants. And then under the screening, depending on the needs of your study, you might want to get a little bit more scientific with how respondents are chosen. But for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to use standard sample. Then there's the attributes we want to use in order for us to specify who we want to take our survey. So we're using things like company size, the role or title someone has, how often they spend, how much time they spend on a computer. And there's a bunch of other filters in there that you can check out and use. Then coming down to the reward section, this is where you specify how much you want to pay per response. And Prolific will tell you if you're offering a fair rate. So if we're going too low, it'll set a warning. But ultimately, the amount you pay should be dependent on how long the survey is. So for this demo, I'm going to say it's $1 per response. Now, before you launch, you need to add money to your account. You can see I'm a bit short, so I'll add a few bucks. Then the last thing we're going to do is test this from the same view that a participant will. So you can see our study title, description, and when we click the open study link, it'll take us right to the survey that we built. Now, I'll go through and test it, and since I'm obviously not as fast as Codex, I'm just going to speed things up here. When I hit submit, it's sending me to that redirect URL we looked at earlier, and we can also see that completion code. Before I publish it, I'm not particularly happy with the design and UX on my survey. So I'm going to tell Codex to turn this into something that's a little bit more intuitive and user-friendly, so it's less daunting for everyone to see this massive survey all at once. Of course, this prompt could be better, but this is a demo. One thing you notice though, I'm telling Codex not to just redesign the page, but to then test it, redeploy it, and then test it again. Taking a closer look, we can see it created a UX that splits up the survey into more easily digestible sections, showing you your progress on the left and the questions on the right. Pretty solid job with little direction. All right, let's finally get this thing launched. So all I'm gonna do is just tell Codex to go ahead and publish the survey, and it'll do that using the Prolific API. One of the things I really like about Prolific is how quickly results come back. You'll notice we published at 11:24 a.m. and now I'm going to switch over to the Prolific dashboard that shows the results. And the last result was received by 11:49 a.m. So in less than 30 minutes, we had all of our results. So that's pretty awesome. Speaking of which, I'm going to switch over to Supabase, where if you remember, we stored our results. To see those, I'll open Supabase and I'm going to open the table editor on the left side. And here's all our results. Now, I'm not too keen on having to look through the data in this format myself, because that's a lot of information and it's only 10 responses. So imagine if we had hundreds. So we'll now build my favorite part of all of this, our results dashboard. What I'm going to do is ask Codex results from our Supabase table directly, and then build a dashboard for me that presents that information. Now, if you're like me, you'll get carried away with visuals and graphs and charts and stuff. So I'm going to keep things somewhat simple for the sake of this demo and ask for two things. Number one, a breakdown of results, and number two, a strategic synthesis of that. So this is pretty awesome. You can see it broke down each of the questions. There's a chart or visual for each, and it makes it very easy to actually now look at and understand the data without having to go through a huge table or wrestle with Google Sheets. But now visuals and charts alone would be somewhat of a waste, given that we're using this very powerful piece of technology that can help us analyze this more deeply. And so that's why I asked for the strategic synthesis. Now skimming through it real quick, you can see it did a pretty solid job analyzing things. But obviously this is only 10 responses, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But you can definitely see how this can significantly speed up the process, going I have a question about something all the way to not just getting the responses, but also being able to analyze and really understand what's being said. This also shows that anyone can start building this type of stuff. You can build your own things now. You don't have to be reliant on other platforms or be stuck paying another subscription. So you can really do this all by yourself. And if you have any questions or if there's anything I can help with, do let me know. I'd love to help. Take care.